This video we'll learn about sloe gin. We'll start with a bit of a chat, we'll look at some historical recipes, then we'll have a look at the recipe itself.
So blackthorn is in the rose family and the prunus genus. So think of prunes, I suppose, for an example. And for the rose family also includes things like apples. Many of our most famous edible foods are of course in the rose family. That lovely bird. And most of them have been cultivated by humans very heavily. So the sloe is thought to be an ancient ancestor or a very close relative to the modern plum. And it can indeed hybridize with the plums. So the cherry plum is one you'll often find a hybrid of. So if you find a particularly big sloe with a little bit of a purplish colouring, then have a look to see if it's maybe a hybrid with something else nearby. Maybe you'll find some plums too. So sloes contain malic acid. One of the main things about malic acid is it will remind you of rich foods like wines, since it's a flavour compound found in many of those foods that are very rich and associated with a rich palate. So as for what you can make with sloes, I suppose sloe gin is the most obvious, isn't it? So that's a very simple recipe. You just stick a load of sugar in a jar, throw your sloes on top, throw your gin on top, close the jar, walk away. It's very simple. So leave it in a cool, dark place as you would with anything else you're trying to keep fresh. With sloes, of course, are jams, tarts, what did you call me, and things of that nature. So because it's such a sour fruit, you definitely have to add a lot of sugar to it. That's okay, it makes it really good for like particularly celebratory meals. So if you prefer a lighter flavour profile, you don't have to add loads of sugar for safety or anything. It's just a lot of people prefer that because we're used to fruits with a lot of sugar in them these days. It's a lovely fruit, but it has to be cooked because it's so astringent and bitter if eaten raw, and it can also make you sick. So all parts of the blackthorn are toxic, so you cannot eat them except for the fruit and the flowers when cooked. So the berries come from the flowers, so you think, okay, they're the same, they'll be safe to eat. They're not actually berries, they're drupes. But the same isn't true for the seed, which is inside the berries. You have to remove the seed. I read a particularly gruesome account from a gentleman who ate a lot of sloes a couple of years ago, but I couldn't find it for this research. I'm very sorry. He found it was stone fruit pips and he assumed them to be sloes. So there you go. So definitely look into the historical literature for what is and isn't edible, because you'll find some very funny stories. So in the modern day with testing, we know that the sloe fruit and sloe flowers are perfectly safe once cooked. Think of like elderberry as another example of a fruit that's perfectly safe once cooked. And that's something that humans really did. We cultivated the food into things edible and we learned how to cook the things that aren't. So we've hidden it from both angles there. Let's go have a look at some fantastic recipes now that these various random pieces of information are disclaimed.
So now for the best part. So I read several interesting books for this project, though I have been making sloe gin for many years. I had to share this with you. Alewives, oh gursy gursy, when thou goest to brew, consider well what you're about to do. Be very wise, very sedently think, that what you're going now to make is drink. Consider who must drink that drink, and then what it is to have the praise of honest men. So that's a good one. So if you're not a drinker, that's fine. I'm actually not a drinker myself, but I do love a good sloe gin, especially around Christmas time or when the summertime is coming in and it's a bit hot. So how to make sloe gin? You will of course need some sloes. These are one of the hybrid ones I was telling you about. So see, they're really big, but they're not as big as a plum, but they're kind of halfway between the two. There you go. So that's great. They won't need that much sugar, but typically you just add enough sugar to coat all the berries in their entirety, with a little bit left over to dust them. So as you see, for me, that was only about 3 teaspoons, which is still a lot of sugar to be adding to any one jar thing. But for this, it really goes all the way. But you don't want too much. You don't want it to be like a cordial, syrupy, sweet mixture, which a lot of sloe gins do end up that way, because people overcompensate for that. So here you see a lovely close-up shot, what it should look like. So just again, enough sugar to mix up through the whole jar and cover them. So you don't need those pounds that you might see on the internet. So here you see just adding the gin. I love my little teddy bear gin bottle there. So very simple. And just pop it in there. So you want to add a ratio of about 1 sloes to 2 gin. So typically that's about half the amount of sloes to gin, but it can vary. So for me, that just came up to just under the lip of the jar, and then you want to make sure your jar is well sterilized first. So boil it in water for at least 15 minutes, the same with the cap, then let it cool down in a cold place and seal it and keep it in a cool, dark place for a couple of months. Typically I do about 6, but you can keep it pretty much indefinitely if I'm honest. Here's some vinegars that are at least a year old, made from sloe, and you saw some dye there as well on top of the jar, made from sloes. So I really hoped you enjoyed this, that it was informative and fun, and you enjoyed the little look at the historical videos too. So go to McCaffreycrafts.com to support Irish heritage arts.